What is up, real ketoners? This is Coach Coop here with another episode of BHB Radio. Tonight I am joined by the wonderful Doug Reynolds. Doug is actually the owner and founder of Low Carb USA, one of the most interesting, well-attended conferences on ancestral eating out there. Doug actually is going to tell his unique story tonight in which he lost I think it's at least 35 pounds and healed from his traumatic brain injury using, fat adaptation and ketones as fuel, essentially. Really fascinating stuff. That story actually inspired him to then go on and want to pass this information along to others and help the rest of the world. And that's evolved into a whole lot of other things, working with doctors, working with healthcare professionals, spreading the good word, if you will. So Doug not only goes into that journey, but gives us a ton of practical insights and things that we can implement into our own lives. Today's episode is also brought to you by Real Ketones. Be sure to check them out at realketones.com for all of your exogenous ketone needs. They are also a full-fledged educational database, making sure that you have everything you need to go from where you are at now to where you need to be. That includes nutritional planning apps, articles, guides, and beyond. Check them out. They want to make sure that you have everything you need to be successful, not just in the short term, but also to end the yo-yo dieting cycle and bridge the gap into long-term success. All right, everybody. Looking forward to diving right in here. This is another episode of BHB Radio. Good evening, everyone. This is Coach Matt, and you are listening to Better Health and Body Radio, your source for the latest and greatest information and understanding in the world of health, nutrition, and performance, where we give you a seat at the table next to the best and the brightest minds to arm you with the information you need to optimize yourself. Join us for another exciting, thought-provoking episode of BHB Radio, starting now. All right, Doug, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've followed your work for a while. We have followed your work at Low Carb USA. For people at home who might not be as familiar, could you kind of introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, well, my name's Doug Reynolds. I'm the co-founder, I suppose, if you really, with my partner, Pam Devine, of Low Carb USA. I had an epiphany back in 2015 when I was introduced to this concept of a ketone. I didn't even know what a ketone was back then. And funnily enough, it was actually someone that was trying to sell me exogenous ketones. And I did a bunch of research being an engineer, and sort of 3 weeks down the road, burying myself in the research, it all made so much sense. It explained all the issues I was having. It had explained issues I had as a distance runner back, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I just decided to pull the trigger. And at that stage, this company was actually just starting and they were out of stock. So I couldn't even order exogenous ketones. But I'd learned so much in the research about the ketogenic lifestyle and the ketogenic diet that I pulled the trigger and decided to do that. And it just made, and I was never, haven't been really metabolically sick like so many people are. Mm-hmm. But I was having a lot of issues that I didn't realize I didn't need to have, and it made just such a difference to my life, like so quickly that I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I didn't know about it, that I'd never heard about. I didn't even know what a ketone was. A ketone was at the age of 51 or something at that stage, And so I pulled the trigger and I decided, let's go and try it. And took Pam shopping, which horrified her. And yeah, and we went and bought all the stuff, fatty meat and full cream whipping cream and full cream yogurt and all those sorts of things, and started doing it. And as I mentioned, it made such a huge difference so quickly that I was pounding my fist. It was like my birthday in 2016 in January, and I was saying, like, how is it possible that I didn't know about this? And we need to do something. And at that time there were a couple of little conferences around the country about this, but it seemed to be like this bubble of people that moved around from conference to conference, and they were, we weren't getting out of that bubble and reaching people like me who didn't know about this, right? And we had a lot of experience on putting on conferences, and so we thought, okay, this is how I can use my skills to help with this. And so we started planning an event. And I knew nothing. I had never been to a low carb conference. I didn't know anyone. And I wrote to a bunch of people. I wrote to 4 of the prominent speakers that I could think of, and thought, okay, if I can get a core of people that were prepared to do it, then we would have something to build on. And Gary Taubes was one that I wrote to. And I just looked him up on his website, and he got back to me and said, was trying to fill me out and see if I knew what I was doing. And in the end, he agreed to have a call with me. And I was very aware of what he charged for his time and stuff. So, I was actually really nervous, and we spent an hour on the phone. And at the end of it, he said to me, okay, if you do this thing, if you put this conference on in San Diego, I'll come and speak. And Pam was listening to me. I had it on speakerphone, and I put the phone down and I looked at her and I thought, shit, like, this is real, and literally establish a domain, build a website, establish a social media presence. We had nothing. And we put that conference on in 6 months at the end of July that same year.
Wow.
And I was pounding my fist saying, we need to put 1,000 people in the room, and I was really upset that we didn't put 1,000 people in the room. We got about 350 or something, but it was still way bigger than any other conference of its type, around that time. And people had to talk me off the ledge, and make me understand that what we had done in that short time was actually quite astounding, which I've come to realize over time, but it took me a while. And it just grew from there. People were started like, people were trying to say, like, what happened, when's next year's event and everything. And I actually ended up on the last day creating a page for the next year's event that I hadn't even been thinking about. We were only planning to do one event, and sold a bunch of tickets for the next year, like literally on the Sunday at the end of that conference. Everyone they were in such a good place at the end of that weekend. And that was something that's carried us through all of this, was how much people respond and how much they appreciate what we do, and how much they enjoy it, how much they get out of it. So we eventually, then people asking us, we need to come to the East Coast, and we eventually put one on in Florida. So that's become our staples now. We've got one in summer in San Diego and one in Florida. We've moved to Boca Raton now. And then every now and then we put on a random one in some other place. We've done one in Seattle, a couple of other places, Virginia. We have a lot of people. We were about to put one on that got canceled in New York last year. And then we were busy. We were starting to plan one in Hawaii. But we've even done one. We got invited to bring some speakers over and do one in Jakarta in Indonesia. which was a massively
Wow.
brilliant. That was such a brilliant experience.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've done. I think the count is about 15 now that we've done since we started.
Oh, that's a solid amount.
So yeah, we've definitely didn't visualize that in the beginning, but then we've also grown into doing so many more things. So the conference was like the start of it, but what we became very aware of very quickly was how important it was to cultivate a community and have a safe place for people to try, to be able to come, to be able to talk to people about it, that where they're not getting criticized and marginalized by their colleagues and their friends and even their doctors, where they can come and talk to someone who's going to be on their side, and we'll be able to help them understand issues that they're having or whatever it is that they want to talk about. And we started introducing a provider list for people to be able to find a doctor that's open to this conversation. And
yeah, I saw that.
And it's gone from there. Gary Taubes actually had a lot to do with introducing me to Adele Height, who and even suggesting that we have a feedback session at I think it was back in 2018 in San Diego, to get feedback from doctors and practitioners that were trying to do this in their practice, to hear what their successes were, what their challenges were, and their experiences. And he was actually busy writing a book about all of that stuff at the same time. So it helped him with a bit of his research. And it got me talking with Adele, and she just had this humongous vision about establishing standard of care around carbohydrate reduction, basically. And that the start of that was to create a set of clinical guidelines for doctors to give them guidance if they decided they wanted to try to utilize this as an option for their patients in their clinic. And the standard of care is funny. She was on a malpractice, on the jury of a malpractice lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And the judge had to explain to them what standard of care meant. And it's not a document. It's not what they get taught at university or college or whatever. It's not what they get taught by or guidance that they may be given by their professional organizations that they belong to. It's actually a consensus amongst practitioners in the same environment with the same training. What they agree is a course of action in any particular situation. That is standard of care. It's an intangible thing. And so in order to try and establish standard of care around carbohydrate reduction, because her feeling was like, our metabolism changes completely when you go keto, or when you go low carb. And so the standard of care, whether it's right or not, whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't matter. If you're not eating carbs and you're ketogenic, especially, different things apply. And mm-hmm. So we need an agreement amongst the people that work in that space, that this is the right thing to do under these situations, as opposed to the current standard of care. And right. So, and it needs to be an alternative one, the same way we're saying people need to be offered this option in the practice. We're not saying it's the answer to everything, right? But it has to be an option that gets offered to their patients. And my personal opinion on that is that if a doctor doesn't do that, and nowadays nobody can say they haven't been exposed to all the research and the information about this, and if they still refuse to offer it to their patients, then they're guilty of malpractice. That's my opinion. I feel very strongly about that. And then, so I don't know, I'm talking here, if you're okay with me going on with this, but the flow of things. So then basically we Dr. Trocalagian you might be familiar with him. He's one half of the MD podcast, Low Carb MD podcast.
Okay.
He started writing on Twitter about like, we need a professional organization, for all these low carb, different communities, and to bring them all together. And I'd already been trying to do that within Low Carb USA, but it just wasn't the right place for it. So, I started talking with him about it, and we decided that what we really needed was a proper nonprofit to house this thing effectively. And so I went out and I learned how to do all of that, and I created a nonprofit, and he's created the board of directors. He's one of the members of our board, and we created the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. And the whole thing, Adele's got a lot to do with that as well. And her thing is, it's all about metabolic health. It's not about keto. It's not about low carb. It just means lifestyle, dietary interventions, as long as they are evidence-based and scientifically based. We need to, if there's any way that we can intervene with a lifestyle that can change somebody's metabolic health or improve it or prevent them from getting sick, even more importantly, without drugs, then they need to be part of this organization, part of this community.
Right.
We migrated the clinical guidelines to this, and now it's got a real home. It really belongs there. We created a really cool provider list now that's migrated over from Low Carb USA, which it's amazing search functions and stuff like that now, so that people can really find somebody to help them if they can. It's not going to tell them they're going to die if they carry on doing this. So from starting out with the idea of putting on one conference in San Diego, it's evolved into this monster. But such good feedback, and it's just so good to be able to sit back and see how many people we've been able to help, and how many people, individuals, as well as especially the practitioners, to give them the support that they need to be able to confidently talk about this in their practices, so that they're not afraid anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how it's evolved into an entire platform from just that initial seed, that initial that nut, right, idea of a conference.
Yeah.
Now you're really making your own dent in the world with regards to health and nutrition, and as a proxy of that, improving people's lives, making them happier, making their sort of first person existence on this world, through that takes them through life a happy and pleasureful one. I mean, it goes beyond just kind of getting science out there. I did want to circle back on a couple things too. First of all, happy belated birthday.
Yeah. It's a while now.
Second of all, well, still. Second of all, yeah, we actually had Gary Tobbs on the podcast not too long ago, and yeah, he was a great interview. So that's awesome to know that he was, instrumental in being like one of the people to get involved with that.
Yeah, I mean, totally. He was the guy. When he believed in me and believed that I could do it, that was the turning point when it became real. It was cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's kind of like what I've heard, what you hear people say, and it might sound cliche, but they say jump and the net will appear, with you guys putting that conference on in 6 months.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
I swear, if I knew then what I know now, I don't think I would ever have had the courage to do it. I think it was more ignorance than anything. I had no idea what I was getting into.
You didn't know what was involved.
That was a good thing, because if I had known, I would have been too scared to do it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So one other thing too that I wanted to hit on was if you actually go to the Low Carb USA website, which great website, by the way, I've been perusing it myself for quite a while. I love that the tagline is turning consensus on its head. And I think what tends to happen, we talked about this with Tim Noakes as well, is there seems to be this idea of groupthink and science turning into consensus, and people putting the word "the" in front of science. and really, I think it should be more said, it's like political science and corporations putting the word "the" in front of science. And what you're really doing here is awesome because it's true science, right? Like you said, you're advocating for low carb, but on a bigger picture, just metabolic preventative health to have a seat at the table, not to be something you force on people as the new consensus, but hey, let's, this should be considered. It should be an option.
Sure.
There should be education on it, just like there would be, prescription drug X, Y, or Z as an option as well, and so that really resonates with me and I think our listeners too.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important.
Now, for you personally, you said you felt some amazing things by pivoting and changing your own health and nutrition and going in this direction. What are some of the things that you've personally have experienced since adopting a more fat adapted, ketone fueled lifestyle?
So, you mentioned Tim Noakes. Tim, I know I've become very well acquainted, good friends with him now, but back then he was just an idol, right? And I used to run the same. I mean, he wrote the Law of Running, which is like the runner's Bible.
Yeah.
But it was really focused on getting people through the Comrades Marathon, which is a huge ultra marathon in South Africa. And I ran that a bunch of times. And when I moved to the States, I had already run 5 of them. And I went back and ran a few more. But it used to get, it got harder and harder and harder. And I was suddenly found in my later 40s that I was putting on a little bit of weight each year, just a couple of pounds, kilo or 2, in South African terms. And I just couldn't get it off. When I used to be bulletproof back in my early 30s, and I used to eat and drink and do tons of beer and eat pizza and whatever, as much as I wanted. And I would still, especially when the training got heavier closer to the race, my weight would still come down no matter what. But that stopped happening after a while. And I used to start thinking that I was just lazy, that I just wasn't running enough. And that was why I was putting on this weight. Didn't matter that I was eating tons of chocolate and sweets and all sorts of stuff because I'm a runner now. I can eat as many carbs as I want. Obviously, that's what I need to do. And I got on the scale and I was 95 pounds, 35 pounds over my ideal weight. And that would just horrified me. And it was literally a couple of days after that had happened that I got this email from this guy trying to, ketones, an alternative source of fuel to glucose. That was the subject line of the email. And that email basically changed my life. It's amazing. I started doing this and I knew nothing, and it was harder to come by information about this back in 2015, and so we just learned from experience. And all the thing that I'd learned later on was about salt and how important it was to eat more salt in that, especially when you first start with this. And I didn't do that, and so I suffered what people call the keto flu pretty severely. And I believe that a lot of that has got to do with not having enough salt in, especially in those first few weeks.
Absolutely.
I can't ever go back and do that all over again. I would love to be able to do it again and eat enough salt, like right from day one, and see whether I do go through that same thing. But it was still only, maybe it hit me after a week, and it was a really bad week, or max maybe 2. Mm-hmm. And then stuff started to just start turning around. Suddenly, my weight already had started to come down. My knees within those 3 weeks had cleared up completely. I was actually doing martial arts at the time.
Oh wow!
And we we, instead of going 4 days a week, we would go twice a week, and we would do just 2 back-to-back classes each of those 2 nights. But it was 90 minutes of really hectic workout. And I would get home at 8 o'clock at night, and I'd be shattered. And I would crawl into bed, and the next morning I would literally almost be on my hands and knees getting to the restroom. You know, I'd sit on the toilet and think, man, I'm getting old. And I just, you know, accepted, like everybody else, that that's just one of those things. You know, I'm on the downslope now. But once I started this, literally within 3 weeks, I was bouncing out of bed in the morning and going for a run the morning after this martial arts workout. That to me was one of the most epic changes, or improvements, was how quickly I now recover from a you know, significant effort. It just amazing. I haven't, you know, I used to struggle with getting like really bad flu at least once, and most times twice in a year. I think I've had flu once now in 5-6 years now, since I started doing this. Respiratory issues, I used to really battle. I can breathe through my nose through the night now. Skin issues on my ears and things that all cleared up. And there's others that clarity, you know, they talk about mental clarity and stuff like that, and that definitely is something that I noticed. But one of the other really big things for me was when I was in my very early 20s, I had a very severe motor vehicle accident, very bad head trauma, and suffered what nowadays we know as a traumatic brain injury, or TBI. You know, I couldn't see for three months. I could see, but I couldn't focus. Like my 2 eyes, people said it was like very disconcerting to talk to me because I was like a chameleon. Like my eyes would move independently of each other.
Wow.
And I literally couldn't focus. So I would put a hand over my eye if I wanted to try and see something, because then it was only one eye, and then so they couldn't meet the focal point together, right? So I could sort of focus with one eye, with each different eye, but when I looked at both eyes, it was just a blur. And I was like that for 3 months. I had a broken collarbone, which they couldn't plate because they couldn't put me on anesthetic because of the brain injury. So I had that wasn't a compound, but it was a completely disjointed, broken collarbone that just was there. I had to strap my arm up all the time because they couldn't do anything with it until my brain came down. You know, and that all got sorted out over time. But the biggest thing for me was the memory, short-term memory. I just kept forgetting. I would, and I still do, but not nearly as much. You know, I'm talking, a thought occurs to me, like different to what I'm talking about, and just for a fleeting second, and suddenly I go blank and I can't remember what I was talking about. And
you.
Yeah, and sometimes people will remind me what I was saying, and it'll come back, and sometimes it never comes back. It's just gone. And people even say to me, "Oh, yeah, that happens to me all the time." I said, "Well, maybe, but never happened to me." You know, that definitely wasn't something that I suffered with before. And it made me very self-conscious, and you know, I couldn't talk in public. You know, and trying to, as an engineer, I became more senior, and I would have to do a presentation of a design or something to senior management or something, and it would freak me out. And you know, I would often get like one of the junior guys that helped me, you know, was on my team, to actually do the presentation and kind of pretend like it was a training thing for him, like to build up his experience. In the meantime, I was just too scared to do it. Was that self-conscious about it. And once I started with this keto thing, that it, like I said, it didn't go away completely, and it hasn't gone away completely, but it is, I don't know, 10 times less frequent than it used to be. And I'm very, that's, that and the recovery were the two things that have had the biggest impact on my life. And like I said, I was never, I didn't have type 2 diabetes with an A1C of 15 or something. Some of the horror stories that you hear, those people have real life-saving turnarounds. But this was still a significant improvement in my life to make me excited about it, I'll tell you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's, just such a great testimony and story of how it changed your life. And then we've said on here before, I think it was with Dr. Mike T. Nelson, that most research initially starts as me search, right? And you find something that helps, and you say, all right, is there something here? Are there principles that I can introduce to other people that can help them? And I think that you personally, and really what you've done to create just a wonderful platform with Low Carb USA, has really helped do that for a lot of other people, to give them that same thing as well. And it sounds like basically, not only did you get healthier and lose a bunch of weight, you burn a bunch of fat, you also were really able to take your life back. With not just the ketogenic diet, but also exogenous ketones having a lot of promise in areas of brain and neurological and cognitive fitness benefits. It's more than just sort of focus and remembering. That is who you are. That's how you show up in the world. So I think that those are, you can't really overstate how important the neurological, mental, and cognitive benefits that come from, fat adaptation and ketones, fueling of those things are.
Yeah, and I agree completely. We have more and more kind of focus on that as our events progress. The first few I did, didn't have anybody talking about brain or mental issues at all. And it was funny. I had a West Palm Beach was our Florida event before we moved to Boca, and I had a speaker drop out on me, like literally 3 days before the event.
Oh no!
And one of the guys actually Jeff Gerber, who runs the Low Carb Denver conference, he was going to be a speaker at my event, but he was speaking at another event on the same weekend, and then coming through on the Sunday to speak at our event. And he had Dr. Georgia E. with him there, as she was also a speaker there. And he said, hey, I can, maybe I can get her to come across as well. And I was desperate, and I had no idea who she was, and she was a psychiatrist. And I thought, what the hell is a psychiatrist going to talk about low carb? I tell you what, I still feel like that talk that she did was like the best talk we've ever had at any conference. She was just amazing. And she's been at so many of our conferences since then. But now we've had Ann Childers and what's his name, Chris Palmer, also psychiatrists. We get Joan Efland, and Dr. Robert Sivers talks a lot about. So addiction is another huge part of this.
Oh yeah.
And that's still, it's a mental thing as well, right? And it's a brain thing. So there's just half our conference almost now is like, guys talking about addiction and mental issues and there's migraines and like you mentioned, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and there's just so many of these things. Chris Palmer did a talk in Boca Raton the last time we had an in-person one, which was the beginning of 2020, in January, before the COVID thing hit. And he told a story from the stage of one of his schizophrenic patients, I think it was, and how it had just cleared up for her completely, and he's very careful to say that it's, especially with psychiatric issues, that it's not the same as me just going on a keto diet, right? They have to be monitored so carefully, and it's very important that it's overseen by a psychiatrist like him that actually knows what they're doing. But the potential is just astounding. And he finished telling that story, and that was kind of like the end of his talk. And it was like I went up to sort of get the Q&A going, and I struggled to speak. Everyone had a lump in their throat. Just to hear how that could help someone like that so much. It was just, that's why I do this. Is for moments like that. It was just the most amazing thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's when you see how it can kind of affect other people like that, it's I think it is true what they say when they say you find happiness in helping try to find it for others too. And that's not just to, again, be on a soapbox or be cliche or anything like that. It's like something that you physically feel.
Totally, and I think that's like why we did it, was because like we thought, how can I not know about this? We have to tell people, and there's so many people that want to become keto coaches and health coaches.
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing. It's like there's such a profound difference. Like, how can other people not know about this? We have to be able to tell people.
Oh yeah, it's like you feel like Prometheus with fire. It's like, a lot of this preventative health stuff of various kinds. It's like, all right, let's give it to the humans now, and anyways, yeah. So I want to get into the conference specifically and how people can kind of learn more about what you do and experience it for themselves in a moment here. One thing that you talked about that I did want to hit on is just the idea of helping people who's in front of you or who are in front of you. So in my own practice, as a health coach and trainer, I work with everybody from people who have chronic conditions and all the way to like pro athletes, right? And obviously there's a lot of people in between those two opposite sides of the bell curve. And I find it interesting how for basically every population you can find that metabolic flexibility or being fat adapted as well as being ketone fueled can benefit them, right? So like for people that I'm working with who have MS and neurological conditions, you can find a lot of research on both ketogenic diet and ketones, of how that can help them, right? We've seen a lot of transformations there. And then also with the athletes too, which I think is fascinating. And I think we've only just started to tap into that because a lot of the research has really only been done in endurance athletes, right? We haven't seen as many more fast twitch athletes or even everyday people kind of more just doing strength training or Tabatas, HIIT training, CrossFit, stuff like that at the gym, kind of observed with as well. We've seen a lot of case studies, but not research there. I was curious. So Dr. Peter Attia, so people who might not know him at home, he's also kind of a big personality, I guess you'd call him, researcher, influencer in the space. He talks about exogenous ketones for athletes, and then his specific words are that they provide him a big time boost by allowing him to do the same amount of work or his work capacity while expending less energy and having less oxygen consumption. So in the context he's talking about, it's for endurance because he's just an everyday weekend warrior who likes cycling.
Right.
To me, though, what's exciting about that is that it could mean that everybody, right, whether you're someone who's got chronic fatigue, suffering from an autoimmune condition, who just needs to be able to expend less energy to get through their day and function, all the way to an athlete or someone who is a weekend warrior who wants to perform better, can function at a higher level and give themselves more performance fuel just through ketones. I think that when you talk about changing lives, that's something that it's interesting how ketones are really almost like a way in which you can provide energy to the cells, to the mitochondria, provide energy to the system that can fuel everything else without taxing the adrenal glands like maybe caffeine would. Do you have any thoughts on that? I know I said a lot there.
Yeah, no, well, just in terms of exogenous ketones themselves, I mean, that is how I got introduced to the whole conversation in the first place.
Right.
When that company did actually get back in stock, I did get some, and I used them for quite a while. I found it helped a lot. For me, when I woke up in the morning, I was never a big coffee person. I didn't feel like caffeine has any effect on me anyway. But I did feel like this helped turn on my brain. There's a lot of purists out there that say, "Oh, you should do it with just with diet or whatever." And I don't know. I feel like, as with so many things in this space, that I don't think we can afford to be dogmatic about anything. I think that everybody's an individual, and that different people respond differently. And then you start to look at the research and the data that's coming out about people like with Parkinson's and those sorts of conditions, and how much that seems to be helping them. I think that there's so much more to come out of that is very encouraging. And the same thing with we go back to endurance athletes. I had a big conversation about this other day with some guys that were training in National Association of Sports Nutrition, but have changed to be completely keto-centric and everything. And some of their students, and we were talking about whether or not it was necessary to add carbs in when you race. So you train and become totally fat adapted, and you spend a year or 6 months or whatever becoming like really effective fat burner, basically. So you're oxidizing fat effectively, you're processing a bunch of that fat into ketones and oxidizing the ketones as well. And your body is producing just that little bit of glucose through gluconeogenesis that it needs for those essential functions that require glucose. And that's it. And that I don't believe that there's any need for people to subsidize with glucose. And all I feel is that it's like they can't, as much as they believe in this fat adaptation thing and the ketogenic diet and all of that, it's like they still have that legacy baggage about carbohydrates, that they cannot believe that they really can perform without those carbohydrates on the day of the race. And I feel like when they infuse those carbohydrates in, most of the time, all that's doing is shutting down the adaptation that they've done. It starts dampening, it starts triggering hormones and stuff that starts dampening the whole process, starts damping down the production of ketones. And I have heard of people talking about like it's very slow trickle, like literally putting a boiled sweet or something under your tongue while you're running. And that trickling in a tiny little bit of glucose, but your body can make that amount of glucose like in a heartbeat if it needs to. So why do you need to have a boiled sweet under your tongue if you're just doing what your body can do anyway? It's all about what's in your head. What I believe is a lot more what's the word? Potentially very helpful is this whole concept of using or utilizing exogenous ketones to fuel while you're running. Because, and I haven't seen, and maybe what you're talking about is that research that I haven't seen, but I believe that if you have to start taking ketones instead of Gatorade during the run, that could help. because when you're really running at your limit, maybe that limit is how fast your liver can produce ketones.
Right.
There's only so much fat it can oxidize. There's only so many ketones it can make. And now if you start infusing some more ketones in exogenously, maybe that'll give you a boost in your performance, like a real boost, not an imagined one. Because in these ultra races and these marathons and stuff, it's 90% of it's in your head. And if you don't believe that you can do this without carbohydrates, you won't be able to do it without carbohydrates. But if you can get your head out of that space, I think that a much better option, if you feel like you need to refuel with something, then I would much prefer to be trying ketones and seeing how much that can help.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts on exogenous ketones.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we've interviewed a lot of people, and there are some that take it like a superfood, and it's actually pretty exciting for those who are just everyday people who maybe are kind of like suffering from anything from obesity to a chronic condition, as far as like putting a little bit of gasoline or energy in the system that can fuel them to do things that their body might not have the resources to do on their own, particularly if some of those sort of energy production assembly lines are kind of broken at the cellular level.
Yeah. And the thing is that by infusing those things, you're not shutting down all those metabolic processes that are going on as a result of this adaptation, right? You introduce carbohydrates, and that shuts everything down.
Right.
If you introduce exogenous ketones, it just adds ketones to your system. It doesn't start shutting down all these processes that you've already got in place through the adaptation of months and months and months of training and eating that way.
Yes, absolutely. Very well said. I think, and then the other thing to think about too is, I think your comment about with sports training and being able to take that intra performance. We know metabolically that like alcohol, I think it is first, and then ketones, carbohydrates or glucose, right? And then after that, fat is that, like, that's the order of preference for the metabolism. And so if you're able to kind of layer something that gets uptaken as like almost like a fourth macronutrient on top of that first, then it'll be longer before you dip into your own reserve, quote unquote, fuel tank. So that is, I think, what basically Dr. Peter Attia was hitting on there with some of his, and alluding to with some of his comments. Now, I want to be respectful of your time because you have been beyond generous with it today. If people are interested in attending the conference, whether it's virtually or in person, where can they find out more information about that? And of course, if they want to look and find maybe a doctor or practitioner who's well versed in this kind of thing, where can they go for that too?
Okay. So how soon is this going to be published? When are you going to put this out?
Oh, pretty quick. I think like within a week. Okay.
So basically what they need to do is go to lowcarbusa.org, not .com, .org, right? And then either on the homepage is a thing about the San Diego event a bit further down, or go to the menu where it says events, select the San Diego event, and it'll show you the speakers that we've already confirmed, the ones that we're still talking to, and there's others that aren't even on there that we're still talking to as well. And then there's a place to go and register. It requires you to create an account on our platform first. And the reason for that is that part of the ticket that you buy, whether you select the live stream option or the in-person option, both of you will get access to the live stream. So if someone buys an in-person ticket, they still get access to the live stream page and all the videos individual videos that we put in there after the editing, a couple of weeks later. And we found that people just they either don't get them or they don't read them or whatever. So if you create an account at the end of the registration process, they never even get the email that gives them their password and whatever to be able to get in there. And then And then on the day of the event, we have 500 people who can't get into the system. So now we make them create their account first and get, set their own password and all of that, and it's a done deal. And then they can go and actually buy the ticket. Just if they're wondering about the process and why it is like that. So yeah, you can select either the live stream option or the in-person ticket. If you're going to be in person, there's an option to be able to select. We have an incredible chef at the hotel that does amazing low carb dinners. So you can sign up to come and attend those dinners. And what's cool about that is that all the speakers and that come to the dinner as well. So you get to sit at a table with, Steve Finney or Rob Sivas or Gary Taubes or somebody. It's pretty cool. And then there's for the practitioners who are looking for continuing education credits, there's an option to sign up for that as well. So in order to keep the price down for everyone else, we used to just charge everyone the same price, and then the people that wanted CME certificate, we would send them one if they asked for it. Now we charge a bit less, but we then charge the people who want a certificate for the certificate.
Sure.
So they can make those three choices, and then there's a discount. Now, if this is going to be more than a week, the low carb, the early bird discount ends on Sunday. But after that, there's going to be another discount. If you go to the page, it'll tell you what to put in there. But it's still going to be a 20% discount, which is pretty cool. And the discount code will probably be Mayhem or something like that. We haven't decided 100% yet, but yeah, go in there and get your ticket and get the discount that's being offered now, because every month the discount becomes less. So
okay,
in July there's going to be no discount. So
got it.
If they want to take advantage of it, then that's the way to do it. In terms of the provider list, what they should do is go to the SMHP website. So we actually just got the domain, the SMHP, but it hasn't actually been migrated to that yet. So it's metabolicpractitioners.org. metabolicpractitioners.org is the SMHP website, and there, there's one of the main menu options is providers, and that if you click on that, it comes up with this really cool search engine, and you can go and put in country, state, city, zip code, doctor's name, specialty. There's different categories for dietitians versus physicians, etc. It's a very comprehensive search engine now, which is very helpful. So and if any of the people listening are actual practitioners, then put your name in. There's a fee to join as a member to be able to attend the grand rounds and participate in the forums, which actually are going to establish the conversations which will establish our standard of care. But you can register yourself as a practitioner for nothing. So you can put your information in there. We have accreditation process, which people have to pay for the training and stuff, but you can get accredited. You can get to have a badge that says they're accredited by the SMHP, and they actually get to use the credentials MHP for metabolic health practitioner.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. So there's all of those things that they can learn about and see on the SMHP site as well.
That's awesome.
And there's the clinical guidelines are on that page as well, which are for any practitioners definitely something they should go and have a look at.
Absolutely. I think I did see that. But yeah, so that's great. I'm glad we have all the resources on the table for people to find if they want. Kind of a quick recap. The conference people know where they can go to that. That is going to be in both San Diego and then a virtual one as well.
Correct.
That's going to be July, and then also, is it August?
No, that's end of August, 26th
End
to
of
29th
August,
of
okay.
August. And then in January, I forget the dates now, but in January, we haven't posted that. That'll be posted in about 2 weeks. But we've got one in January in Boca Raton.
Yeah, that's okay. Awesome. Awesome. I think we also breached subjects for everybody listening at home. We talked about how you guys can feel free to consider preventative health and looking at dis-ease from a metabolic perspective as sort of a foundational piece that should have a seat at the table amongst other types of medicine as well. We got into different effects you can see when you embark on a low carb approach or ketogenic type approach. In addition to that, we also got into various things on exogenous ketones, whether you're taking them as almost as an ergogenic or performance enhancer on occasion, like Doug, or like an athlete. And then I think in addition to that, also people who take them on a regular basis for wellness. Let's see. Oh, and then also Keto Flu, right? I think that was one thing I did want to reiterate that I didn't before, and that was make sure you're well hydrated, including your foundational electrolytes like salt when you are first embarking on these things.
Yeah, salt's really important.
I think it's a pretty good recap. All right, Doug, thank you so much for coming on. Maybe see you in person at the conference too here in a little bit, actually.
Yeah, I hope so. That'll be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Everybody, this has been an awesome information-packed show. Listen to it once, twice, 3 times, whatever you need to get all the information from it. Thank you once again, everyone, for inviting us into your home. This has been another exciting episode of BHB Radio.